Okay, so thank you very much. So we're going to start the class with number 3 and 4. Let me show you that. We're going to see number 3 and 4 that I have already sent you. I've sent you the document that we have here. I'll show you. So first we'll see the script for number 3. Ya les he enviado estos guiones para la 3 y para la 4. Ahora vamos a verlo bien rápidamente. Son los que, bueno, pues vamos a ir viéndolos. Entonces, en la 3 básicamente tenemos este guión, que sería, the main topic of the reading is, and then we say what the main topic of the reading is. Okay, so that's what we have there. So the main topic of the reading is, we have 12 seconds to say that. Actually, we have 12 seconds to say what the main topic of the reading is. So we're seeing right now number 3 in the questions, right? So today we're going to see number 3 and number 4 of the TOEFL speaking section. And tomorrow we're going to start with the writing section, okay? I'll say that in Spanish. Hoy día vamos a ver la 3 y la 4 y mañana ya vamos a empezar con el writing al final. Entonces, so let's see. Number 3, we start with the main topic of the reading is. We say what the main topic of the reading is. Then we say, as a matter of fact. In the lection, furthermore, they mention, indeed, and in fact. So actually, the key here in number 3 is to say very, very few things. That's the key. I'll say that again. So the key in order to have a very successful question number 3, the key is to not say everything, okay? That's the key. So the key is to say the least things as possible. Van a encontrarse con que la número 3 que ahora vamos a practicar puede llenarles de muchos datos, muchos datos. Podrían hablar 2 minutos de la número 3. Si pueden hablar harto tiempo porque es muy amplia. Es un lecture y es un reading que después es de un tema académico, como habíamos visto al inicio, pero es un tema tan largo que ustedes podrían hablar 2 minutos de ello, pero solo tenemos 1 minuto. Entonces la clave en la 3 y en la 4 es decir lo menos, no digo decir lo menos posible, pero escogerse 5 oraciones de 12 segundos y mencionarlas. ¿Sí? No vamos a mencionar todo porque es imposible. Okay, with that being said, let's see how number 3 is actually done. Let me show you. So let's go to Magoosh. I have already sent you the script for number 3 and 4. Okay, so ya les he enviado el script del número 3 y 4. Vamos a practicar eso hoy día. Okay, so we'll practice number 3 and 4. So we'll start with number 3, actually. So let's see number 3, okay? We're going to see how number 3 is actually. So let's see, we're going to have this. And let's read, please. Here's the text. I'll send it to you through the chat. Les estoy enviando en el chat también, pueden leerlo. Let's take notes here. Okay, so we're gonna go to the listening part. So let's have 1 more minute to finish. Okay, so let's continue. We're gonna listen.
Now listen to part of a lecture on the topic you've just read about.
The idea that altruism is a uniquely human characteristic that cannot be found in nature might be popular among certain philosophers, but it really has little basis in fact. Actually, altruism is relatively common in the animal kingdom. Well, for example, in certain families of squirrels, when a predator, say like a fox, comes around, the squirrels are known to shriek out to warn their family members about the danger, even if the noise makes them targets for the predator. Similarly, when a herd of, say, wildebeests is attacked, well, stronger members of the pack will try to trample the threat rather than let the young and weak get picked off, even if this subjects them to danger. So what is the reason for all of this? Evolutionarily speaking, it seems like a puzzle, right? I mean, why would evolution favor the development of altruistic behaviors that might endanger individual life? The answer is it's a bit complicated, but essentially the answer is that by protecting the entire community, including several relatives, the altruistic animal ensures that the community's genes as a whole can still be passed on. Well, in other words, if a single squirrel dies after shrieking at a fox, but the entire community is spared, well, that means that from a collective perspective, the community's fitness is increased by having altruistic behaviors associated with its members.
Using the points and examples given in the lecture, explain how altruism may be a beneficial characteristic for some animals.
Let's listen again.
Now listen to part of a lecture on the topic you've just read about.
The idea that altruism is a uniquely human characteristic that cannot be found in nature might be popular among certain philosophers, but it really has little basis in fact. Actually, altruism is relatively common in the animal kingdom. Well, for example, in certain families of squirrels, when a predator, say like a fox, comes around, the squirrels are known to shriek out to warn their family members about the danger, even if the noise makes them targets for the predator. Similarly, when a herd of, say, wildebeests is attacked, well, stronger members of the pack will try to trample the threat rather than let the young and weak get picked off, even if this subjects them to danger. So what is the reason for all of this? Evolutionarily speaking, it seems like a puzzle, right? I mean, why would evolution favor the development of altruistic behaviors that might endanger individual life? The answer is it's a bit complicated. But essentially, the answer is that by protecting the entire community, including several relatives, the altruistic animal ensures that the community's genes as a whole can still be passed on. Well, in other words, if a single squirrel dies after, say, shrieking at a fox, but the entire community is spared, well, that means that from a collective perspective, the community's fitness is increased by having altruistic behaviors associated with its members.
Using the points and examples given in the lecture, explain how altruism may be a beneficial characteristic for some animals.
Now listen to the answer. Okay, listen to what I say. Por favor, escuchen lo que yo voy a decir. Okay, so we're gonna start. Okay, in 3, 2, 1, go. The main topic of the reading is altruism in animals, which refers to the urge to selflessly help others, very common among humans. As a matter of fact, one would think that it's very unusual to see these acts carried by animals, because this would mean that animals who perform altruistic behaviors would die more often. In the lecture, furthermore, they mentioned that altruism is common in the animal kingdom. For instance, in families of squirrels, they perform altruistic behaviors, warning family members when a predator comes. Indeed, the noise makes them a target, and it's sort of a puzzle to understand the basis for this behavior. In fact, there is an explanation, and it's this: by protecting the community, altruistic animals can ensure community genes can be passed on. Okay, so that's an answer, okay? So if you see the answer, so can anybody tell me, did I mention everything in my answer? Anybody? Did I forget about something?
You missed the second explanation why animals are altruism.
Excellent. So yes, that's true. I missed the second part, and that's the purpose. Okay, so what I want to show you is that with only one of them, there are 2 examples, right? So the mistake many people would make, el error que muchos cometerían, es tratar de mencionar todo. Sí, ese sería el error que todos cometeríamos acá, el tratar de mencionar los 2 ejemplos. Eso es básicamente imposible, porque se darían cuenta que lo que yo he dicho, para que tenga cierto sentido y demás, no habría forma. Además, al obviar directamente una parte, me puedo concentrar en revisar lo que estoy escribiendo y preparar la respuesta. Eso es algo importante. Nos tenemos que asegurar que estos 5 puntos, cada uno tenga 12 segundos. ¿Sí? Entonces, básicamente podemos añadir o quitar palabras en el medio, ¿no? Entonces, estamos escuchando, ya hemos entendido el ejemplo de los squirrels. Entonces, cuando está hablando del otro ejemplo, podemos usar ese tiempo para poder un poco modificar lo de arriba que hemos escrito, añadiendo algunas partes, asegurándonos que tengan casi la misma longitud. Eso es lo importante. Sí, eso es lo importante. Acá no se les va a evaluar si es que mencionan todo o no mencionan todo. Se les va a evaluar si es que lo que dicen tiene sentido en la forma en la que explican la lectura. Pueden obviar partes de la parte de la lectura o de la parte que han escuchado. Eso es posible y es común también el que obvien eso. Sí, o sea, y es inteligente, como les digo, porque sería muy difícil el incluir todo. Sí, sería muy difícil, les soy franco. Les digo porque, bueno, eso es lo que les dije antes de escuchar esto. Les dije que esa es la clave, el obviar ciertas partes, para poder armar inteligentemente. Entonces, esa es la clave de esta, de la número 3. Es escuchar, tener, digamos, escrito, y cuando tengamos lo suficiente, no se preocupen si les falta un ejemplo o dos. ¿Sí? No es lo importante, o sea, no nos dicen en la orden, haga un resumen de todo, no dice eso, no dice para nada. La orden es básicamente, no les voy a mostrar, creo que acá dice, o si no les voy a mostrar, de que explica cómo el altruismo puede ser beneficial para ciertos animales, ¿sí? Usando algunos ejemplos. Entonces, podemos usar algunos, podemos usar todos, podemos decir ciertas cosas, pero como les digo, el mayor error que uno comete normalmente es tratar de usar todo y al final no se le va a entender. Eso es sumamente importante, ¿ok? So, with that being said, let's go to, let's see, okay, let's see. Let's try with somebody, okay, please, probably Camila, or, yeah, Camila, or it could be Andrea Condarco. Okay, let's go with Andrea Condarco, okay? Let's try our best, okay? Let's have our 1 minute. Okay, Andrea, are you ready? You're ready, right? What happened to your video? Okay, she froze, actually. Let's go with Camila. Camila Monk. Okay, let's try our best. Let's start in 3, 2, 1, and go.
The main topic of the reading is the altruism between animals. Altruism is the urge to selfishly help others. As a matter of fact, it is common among humans, and it could be weird to find it between animals because they could get killed. In the lecture, furthermore, they mention that in the animal kingdom, there are some examples why animals could be altruism. They talk about the squirrels. They try to, they climb to their tree when a fox comes in order to advise their family that there is coming a predator. Indeed, they do this because they are trying to save their family in order to pass the genes and the community growing up.
Okay, thank you very much. So the one thing I want to say, it's furthermore, not furthermore. Okay, it's furthermore, like with a furthermore. Okay. With that being said, probably you realized, Camila, probablemente todo el resto se han dado cuenta que al inicio parece que tenemos harto tiempo, pero en realidad, justo para dar este enganche que Camila quería mencionar, lo ha hecho muy bien, por cierto, pero justo para poder mencionar de que, digamos, de que hacen esto y que hay una explicación que para su comportamiento ahí le ha faltado tiempo y lo ha dicho rápidamente. No que ha estado mal, sino que lo que queremos decir es de que, digamos, como les he dicho, lo importante es de que nos enfoquemos en pocas cosas. Hubiera sido imposible que ella pueda mencionar el otro ejemplo, si se han dado cuenta. A no ser que lo hubiera mencionado solo el otro y no el de los squirrels. Sí, o sea, porque si no vamos a mencionar los dos ejemplos y no nos va a dar tiempo para decir la parte de que the basis for this behavior is that animals want to protect the community, and by that they want to ensure the community's genes to be passed on to the next generations. Si se han dado cuenta, eso me tomó unos 10, 15 segundos básicamente, incluso más, digamos, ¿no? En mi respuesta me ha tomado 24, es decir, desde esa parte. ¿Ok? Entonces, eso es bien, bien importante. Ok, con eso mencionado, vamos al siguiente, ¿ok? Vamos al siguiente, pero ya con este guión, ¿ok? Todos, por favor, abramos el archivo que he enviado al WhatsApp, el número 3, y llenemos. En realidad, queremos con estas 5 palabras, digamos, como ponernos tiempos, ¿no? O sea, 12 segundos, 12 segundos, 12 segundos, 12 segundos, 12 segundos. Tenemos que mencionar 5 cosas. Eso es todo. ¿Sí? Solo 5. Y de la lectura podemos sacar 2. O sea, tenemos que sacar 2. ¿Sí? Entonces, por ejemplo, ahora cuando vayamos a leer esto que vamos a leer, que es el siguiente ejemplo, estos 2 primeros, cuando leamos, vamos a tomar 2 notas, ¿sí? Que es the main topic of the reading is, y después vamos a ir as a matter of fact y algo más. Y entre esas 2, al acabar de leer ya deberíamos tener los 24 segundos armados. Ya tenemos 24 segundos de la respuesta. Entonces, no se preocupen de incluir todo en la lectura que vamos a leer. No se preocupen. Sí, o sea, más bien incluyan, digamos, the main topic of the reading is something, y ahí le ponen, explican un poco qué es. Traten de mentalmente pensar, decir, sí, me va a tomar unos 10, 12 segundos, unos 8, 10, 12 segundos, de ahí, as a matter of fact, y otra cosa de 10, 8, digamos, 12 segundos, ¿no? Entonces, ese es el tema.
Marcelo, could you please send it to me, to the other group, please?
Yeah,
Can you
yeah.
send it to me?
I already sent it. I already sent it.
In my group, no.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm gonna send that. Okay, so
Thank
hold
you.
on. Okay, so okay, so here it is.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's gonna have this. Okay, so here there's okay. So everybody has it right now. So that's the thing. Okay, so please that's the thing. Okay, so cuando leamos esto vamos a básicamente armar 24 segundos y de ahí en lo que vamos a escuchar vamos a armar los siguientes 36. Como les digo, no necesitan tomar nota de todo. Sí, esto lo vamos a hacer así y vamos a ir, vamos a ver qué pasa. Okay, let's go to the next question. I'm gonna send that. Voy a enviar esto.
Excuse me, you didn't send it to the chat.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Here it is. Okay. Okay, so very quickly, let's take notes. Sus notas deberían ser así, ¿no? O sea, digamos, the main topic of the reading is, acá unas 2 líneas, ¿verdad? Explicando, y acá un poco más de facts, con eso ya tenemos 24 segundos. No estoy incluyendo todo, por supuesto, solo unas partes, estoy obviando algunas, no hay problema, ese es el punto. Okay, so let's have 30 more seconds, please. Okay, we're gonna listen.
Now listen to part of a lecture from a psychology class.
Hypnosis is controversial for several reasons. First, not everyone can actually be hypnotized. I mean to say, only certain types of people are able to fall completely under the power of a hypnotist's suggestions. But at the same time, a lot of patients are eager to please their therapists. So for this reason, patients might be likely to pretend to be hypnotized, when in reality, they're wildly improvising. That means hypnotherapy leads to false positives, times when patients exaggerate the effects. People make up memories, totally false information that they otherwise wouldn't have said, just so in order to make it seem like the hypnotism is working. And it gets worse. Sometimes hypnosis might create false psychological problems. For example, these days, a lot of people question whether split personality disorder, or as it's actually called, dissociative identity disorder, whether this disease, in which people have multiple personalities, it's questioned whether this is a disease that is found in nature or whether psychiatrists themselves basically created the disorder. It's thought that when psychiatrists question patients suffering from trauma and used hypnosis, they sometimes bombarded them with leading questions. Then these questions basically implanted the idea of split personalities where it didn't even exist before. No one stopped to think that the hypnosis might only reinforce made-up behavior by giving patients an excuse, a scapegoat. Many times, for example, people claim to have been suffering from dissociative identity disorder to avoid being held liable in court for crimes allegedly committed by their other personalities.
Using the points and examples given in the lecture, explain why hypnotherapy has proven to be a controversial form of treatment.
Okay, so I'll show you how it should be answered. Sorry. The main topic of the reading is hypnotherapy, which is the use of hypnosis in a clinical psychiatric context, which has fallen out of favor. As a matter of fact, this involves inducing patients to dreamlike states and encouraging them to follow orders. The information gathered from the patient during hypnosis is not reliable at all. In the lecture, furthermore, they mention that is controversial because certain types of people can fall, but others cannot. And indeed, there is sort of a false positive when patients, in order to please their therapists, create false memories, and this can create multiple personalities. In fact, questions asked by these psychiatric people can make them feel that they have split personalities. Okay, so that's 1 minute, right? So I didn't mention everything at all, and these are my notes. Okay, this is the first time I've ever done this, by the way. These are my notes. Ok, entonces estas son mis notas, no están tan perfectas, pero si se han dado cuenta, como que he mantenido un poco unas 2 líneas en cada uno, digamos, ¿no? Unas 2 líneas en cada uno, ¿verdad? Más o menos. Entonces, más o menos me he guiado por eso. ¿Sí? No he tenido que mencionar todo, no lo haga. Ok. With that being said, let's go with Shanik. Okay, let's start in 3, 2, 1, and go.
The main topic of the reading is hypnotherapy. Hypnotherapy is the use of hypnosis as a practice, and it involves causing patients into a dream state. As a matter of fact, the clinician order the patients but the information that is given is not reliable. In the lecture, furthermore, they mention that patients are in extreme relaxation and could indeed not everyone can be hypnotized, and patients could be pretending that are hypnotized. Um, Even it could create psychological problems that didn't exist before. So, hypnotherapy, in fact, is controversial because are used even as excusing crimes.
Okay, thank you very much. That was sort of great. Okay, it wasn't bad at all. Let's go with uh, let's go with Armando. Let's please start in three, two, one, and go.
The main topic of the reading is about hypnotherapy, where it mentions that involves coaxing path into a dream state. This makes people more open to express themselves. As a matter of fact, the woman says that there is a fake behavior of this method, and some uncertain people can be hypnotized in this state. Indeed, they improvise to get people to know the therapy functions. In fact, this will become a mental disorder, like disorder, the disassociation behavior, and could damage the behavior of the people. So this is a therapy that could damage some some persons that are not eligible for this therapy.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Armando, did you use the word for instead of because?
Yes.
Oh, great. That's excellent. Everybody saw that, right? So he said for instead of because, and that's very smart, actually. He's changing the word because for the word for. That's very smart. Okay, let's go with let's go with Sebastian, please. Okay, let's please start in three, two, one, and go.
Okay. The main topic of the reading is the use of hypnosis in clinical psychiatric context. As a matter of fact, the practice involved coaxing patients into a dreamlike. So, I'm sorry, I lost the document. I lost the document, sorry.
Okay, so no problem. We're gonna try again. No, no worries, Sebastián. Don't be worried. But I want to explain. Quiero explicar que la razón por la cual les dejo no es por mala persona, sino porque quiero que todos traten siempre de en este minuto hacerlo, ¿sí? O sea, pase lo que pase. Eso es algo bien importante. O sea, mencionen algo, nunca va a ser ideal. Sí, no sé si les mencioné, pero tal vez no, de que en realidad el segundo examen del TOEFL en el que di, yo no había dormido, pueden creer esa mala suerte. O sea, justo para dar el segundo examen de TOEFL, yo no dormí nada, ¿no? O sea, realmente es cierto, es una historia bien, bien cierta, ¿no? O sea, creo que me puse bien nervioso y no dormí nada. Primera vez en mi vida que creo que no había dormido nada, nada. Me puse nervioso en el examen, o sea, es más, o sea, un día antes, ¿no? Me puse nervioso, no pude dormir. Normalmente duermo a las 11 y de ahí me puse nervioso, tipo 1 de la mañana, me fui a duchar, dije, por lo menos estaré duchado para salir 6 de la mañana, y eso creo que fue mala idea. Y al final fui y llegué con una especie de, una depresión tremenda al examen, ¿no? Dije, pucha, qué macano, o sea, qué mala suerte que no he dormido nada. Y resulta que, bueno, pues he dicho, no hay de otra, trataré de hacerlo mejor y me fue bastante bien. Y eso ahorita me estoy acordando que en el primer examen TOEFL, en el que di en el del 2016, les mencioné el que saqué 112, incluso me confundí de fecha, es decir, me inscribí para unas 2 semanas antes y por alguna razón, por los nervios, asumo, vi que era sábado y en realidad era viernes o algo así. Sí, era algo así. Y de ahí fue el sábado y no había nadie. Y resulta que me la había perdido, ¿no? O sea, me confundí. Imagínense esos nerviosismos, ¿no? O sea, el día viernes era el examen y yo fui el sábado a la institución y dije, quiero dar mi TOEFL. Me dijo, no hay nadie que va a dar el TOEFL. Después he visto la fecha y digamos que era una fecha del 6 y resulta que decía 5, entonces me había confundido totalmente de fecha, es decir, imagínense esa mala suerte. He tenido que pagar de nuevo, digamos, ¿no? Entonces, eso sucede, sí, o sea, de que, no sé, pues sucedan altercados en el medio y demás. Siempre la idea es de que tratemos de hacer lo mejor posible, más allá de todo, porque solo vamos a tener una chance. Sí, esa es la macana. Pucha, sería lindo que hubiera una persona que nos diría, no, tranquilo, pero lamentablemente es una grabadora y la grabadora va a captar todo lo que digamos o no digamos. Tratemos de mencionar algo siempre, pero no hay problema, Sebastián, ¿ok? Vamos a tener otra oportunidad, tranquilo, de eso sucede. Más bien para eso estamos, para practicar en este curso. Okay, let's go with Yeti. Okay, Yeti. Let's start in 3, 2, 1, and go.
The main topic of the reading is that hypnotherapy is the use of hypnosis in clinical people. Psychiatric context, which is it falls in favor, is not saying the same thing. As a matter of fact, the practice involves coaxing patients into dreamlike. The information is not reliable. Indeed, hypnotists, not everyone can be hypnotized. A lot of people pretend that they are hypnotized, but they're not. In fact, hypnotism will create psychology problems and create false personalities. And the questions are creating different people's behavior.
Okay, thank you. That was great. He used all the connectors. I think it was great. Okay, so for the rest of the people, we're gonna go and do the next one, okay? So let's go and do the next one. Okay, so after this, we're gonna have the rest of the people who didn't talk. Alan, Christian, I think Diego, and we're gonna give Sebastian another shot. Okay, we're gonna give you another shot. So let's go to the next one. Okay, and we're gonna.
So before we start the next one, I have a question. When we are taking the test, we could we have the possibility that we could take notes on the computer or only in pieces of paper.
Only pieces of paper, sadly. Okay,
Okay.
so that's the problem. As we're gonna have many pieces of papers, podemos pedir las hojas de papel que queramos. Sí, es más, pueden tomarse el tiempo para pedir las hojas, escribir los guiones de memoria, tenerlos listos y de ahí recién empezar las preguntas. Se puede hacer eso. Yo he hecho eso. Piden nomás las hojas que sean, ponen número 1, pack, el guión, número 2, pack, el guión, número 3, pack, el guión, número 4, el guión. Ya las tienen listas. Entonces viene y después leemos. No se puede en computadora, lamentablemente. Ahora lo estamos haciendo así, ¿no? Pero en realidad no se puede, en ningún caso. Sí, okay, so thank you for your question. Let's go to the next one. So we're gonna have these, and and everybody should do this as well. Por favor, todos hagan igual, tal vez les pregunte igual, okay? I'm gonna send that to the group. Okay, let's listen.
Now listen to part of a lecture from a class on ancient history.
Climate change hasn't always been seen as such a major factor on how we've progressed, how culture has developed. But more and more, we're finding that it does play a major role. Let's take the example of Egypt. The country today is harshly divided between the Sahara Desert, where basically nothing grows, and the area around the Nile River Valley, which is still one of the most fertile places on the whole planet. But the thing is, we're now discovering that the landscape of Egypt was not always divided in that way. Instead, until the 4th millennium BCE, the desert of Egypt was actually a rich, prosperous area of fields and farmable meadows. There were societies living away from the Nile, successfully farming, or getting by in a place that would later be completely uninhabitable. But then, of course, the climate changed and the Sahara Desert formed. That meant people were forced to move to the Nile Valley to survive because there were no more fields to cultivate or animals to hunt. So right, you can imagine their culture had to adapt as they moved to a new area, a new climate. But it doesn't stop there. The Nile Valley was already settled. So these newcomers fleeing the desert, they evidently fought the people already living in the valley. And we see that from the construction of these giant defensive walls for the first time in history. So right, people joined together behind these walls and formed cities to protect themselves. This was a large interaction between communities, deeply affecting the local culture. The changing landscape was at the heart of that change.
Explain how the lecturer's claims give a concrete example of climate change's effect on culture.
The main topic of the reading is climate change. That is not a modern phenomena. uh, variations in weather patterns actually responsible for the greatest revolutions in history. As a matter of fact, small changes in weather can have profound effects in society. Professionals are investigating the repercussions of climate change since the dawn of civilization. In the lecture, furthermore, they mentioned that climate change has played a major role. For instance, in Egypt, right now it's harshly divided into the Sahara Desert and the Nile Valley. Indeed, it was not always like that. Uh, the desert was very prosperous, but because climate change, people had to move. In fact, because of the fact that the Nile Valley was already settled, many people thought that were living there, and that's why they construct very defensive big walls to protect themselves. Okay, so that's sort of the answer. I didn't have any time to prepare that. Okay, so I mentioned everything. Uh, Probably was not perfect, but I think it was reasonable. Okay, so let's go with who's missing, Alan. Okay, Alan, let's please start. Let's do our best in 3, 2, 1, and go.
The main topic of the reading is about cultural impact of the climate change. As a matter of fact, there are evidence that shows that there were through history, for history, there was so for climate changing. In the lecture, furthermore, they mentioned climate is so closely tied to productivity and fertility to the land. In that dimension, Egypt, there was now is a desert, and any growth in the land, but and to it there was a civilization grow, and it was so successful. In fact,
Okay,
professional.
thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Alan. Thank you very much. So you mentioned all the connectors, and that was great. Okay, we could improve, but it was a fairly good answer. Let's go to who else is missing? Oh yeah, Diego. Let's please start in 3, 2, 1, and go.
Okay. The main topic of the reading is about the climate change and the evidence that it exists even throughout the history. As a matter of fact, climate is so closely tied to productivity and fertility of the land. In the lecture, furthermore, they mentioned that the climate change have a major role because of the difference between the Sahara Desert and the Nile Valley. Indeed, it not always be like that, because before the Sahara Desert was a farming valley where people start uh, work there. In fact, many people fought for these contracts and construct the walls.
Thank you very much. So, who else is missing? Oh, Christian. Let's go with you. Let's start in 3, 2, 1, and go.
The main topic of the reading is climate change and its repercussion in human history. The climate has affected life on Earth from its beginning due to the fact that it affects farm and productivity of the land. As a matter of fact, little long-term changes of climate were really relevant on wars, revolutions, and development of many cultures. In the lecture furthermore, they mentioned the example of Egypt, where we find two different landscapes, the desert and the Nile River. Indeed, it wasn't always like that. Uh, Long ago, it was a really big valley where a lot of cultures could farm and produce on the land. But the climate has changed and they, sorry, I got lost.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's go very quickly to number 4. Okay, let's go to number 4. Actually, I'm gonna show you number 4 tomorrow. We're gonna on Thursday we're gonna practice number 4. So number 4 is actually easier than number 3. Let me tell you why. So number 4 is actually you only need to listen something. En la 4 solo necesitan escuchar algo. De igual manera es un lecture, lecture se le dice porque es una clase, ¿no? O sea, tal vez alguien se confunde, yo me confundía, ¿ok? Incluso me confundo ahora cuando digo lecture y digo lectura, no, en realidad es una especie de una clase hablada, eso se le dice lecture. Entonces un lecture es de una clase hablada, es decir, un listening, si quieren verlo así. Sobre igual un tema así académico que puede ser sobre cualquiera de estos temas, ¿no? O sea, cambio climático, qué sé yo, pero lo bueno es de que solo es la parte auditiva, no hay la parte escrita. De igual manera es relativamente amplio, sí, y de igual manera en este 4 tenemos algo elaborado que es básicamente according to the lecture, as a matter of fact, indeed, verily, all in all. Ok, entonces tenemos que dividirlo en 5 partes, de igual manera, de 12 segundos, es bien simple. Se han dado cuenta que estos guiones no son tan elaborados porque no se puede, lamentablemente. No es porque no se haya querido, no se haya tenido el tiempo, o sea, son muy, muy aleatorios. Por ejemplo, la 2 no es bien fácil, lo que les he dicho. Es un cambio en la escuela, ¿verdad? La 1 es una opinión, pero en estos pueden ser, digamos, temas diferentes. Pero el hecho de que ustedes hayan mencionado esas palabras les da mucha riqueza de vocabulario. In fact, as a matter of fact, indeed. Entonces les da mucha riqueza de vocabulario. Y 2 les da orden, es decir, de que dividan en 12 segundos, 12 segundos, 12 segundos. Entonces al tomar notas ponen dos líneas, pasan al siguiente, 2 líneas, y después ya acabó, ya no mencionan nada más, usen el tiempo para poder llenar. ¿Sí? Entonces, rápidamente les voy a mostrar una. Okay, let's go to number 4. We're going to go to number 4. Number 4 actually in the speaking section.
Now listen to part of a lecture in a literature class.
In the 8th century BCE, a legendary author named Homer wrote 2 epic poems. You probably know them already, the Iliad and the Odyssey. They're fascinating poems, really, partly because they give us such a clear window to the culture of the time. But what culture or what period of Greek history was Homer describing? His own era or an earlier one? It's an interesting question, but it's very likely there's no real answer. You see, Homer was working in the oral tradition. Before he wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey down, poems were told and retold by generations of storytellers. Each generation added details to the poems, so it's likely that these poems are actually this. They're an interesting mixture of historical details about a bunch of different time periods. So let me give you a couple of examples. Here's one. Homer describes helmets made out of boar tusks. Well, just these kinds of helmets have actually been discovered in sites dating back to the 2nd millennium BCE in Greece. They weren't used in later time periods. That's a pretty clear indication, right? So clearly Homer's poems preserved some authentic details about the distant past, and some would argue that's the era Homer intended to write about. But then we take a look at another detail and it's a bit more nebulous. Homer describes chariots, horse-drawn wagons carrying warriors into battle. He describes them as simply carrying troops on and off the battlefield. That might be how chariots were used in Homer's time, sure, but in earlier history, the time when those helmets might have been used, say, they were used in battles themselves. The chariots, that is. So this is a good example of Homer adding details from his own world into the poems.
Using points and examples from the talk. Now listen to part of a lecture in a literature class.
In the 8th century BCE, a legendary author named Homer wrote 2 epic poems. You probably know them already, the Iliad and the Odyssey. They're fascinating poems, really, partly because they give us such a clear window to the culture of the time. But what culture or what period of Greek history was Homer describing? His own era or an earlier one? It's an interesting question, but it's very likely there's no real answer. You see, Homer was working in the oral tradition. Before he wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey down, poems were told and retold by generations of storytellers. Each generation added details to the poems, so it's likely that these poems are actually this. They're an interesting mixture of historical details about a bunch of different time periods. So let me give you a couple of examples. Here's one. Homer describes helmets made out of boar tusks. Well, just these kinds of helmets have actually been discovered in sites dating back to the 2nd millennium BCE in Greece. They weren't used in later time periods. That's a pretty clear indication, right? So clearly Homer's poems preserved some authentic details about the distant past, and some would argue that's the era Homer intended to write about. But then we take a look at another detail and it's a bit more nebulous. Homer describes chariots, horse-drawn wagons carrying warriors into battle. He describes them as simply carrying troops on and off the battlefield. That might be how chariots were used in Homer's time, sure, but in earlier history, the time when those helmets might have been used, say, they were used in battles themselves. The chariots, that is. So this is a good example of Homer adding details from his own world into the poems.
Using points and examples from the talk, explain why the professor thinks there is no real answer to the question of what period of history Homer described.
This should go like this. According to the lecture, Homer poems offer a window to the culture he lived in, like the Iliad and Odyssey. So the question is, what period of time? As a matter of fact, there is no real answer. Because before, poems were told by different generations of storytellers, and they added details to those poems. Indeed, those are interesting mixes of different periods of times. For instance, helmets used in boar tusks were used before Homer's generation. Barely, there is another example about chariots carrying troops on and off the battlefield, but they were not used in battles themselves in Homer's time. All in all, he used details from the past in his own poems of his generation. Okay, so that's the way it should be. Okay, probably, as I said, not perfect, but mention the various details and try to keep time. Okay, so with that being said, I'll ask you, estoy mandando una encuesta, por favor pueden llenarla y después salir de la clase